I could see why some of the boys took him for snarky. He had a sardonic way about him, a walk and talk that just wasn't normal around here. He paced, like a man trying to keep going despite the world throwing haymakers. Even though he'd throw friendly jabs at you, it would always come from a place of love. And when you needed to talk, he would listen. Yeah, I think it would be fair to say I liked Chris from the start. This is the Shawshank Redemption.
Like halfway through, you could, I don't know, but it might be visual, but I slowly put it together what you were doing. All right, hell yeah.
I still try to make an effort to catch you off guard with the synopsis, because something mean that Chris has been doing lately is, as we're setting up, he'll do an impression of me doing a synopsis of our podcast.
Because I really don't know what the synopsis is going to be whenever we record them. So my reaction is authentic. I don't know what he writes ahead of time. And vice versa, whenever it's my turn, he doesn't know what I'm going to write.
And there have been a couple too many times where he's gotten close to what it's going to be. And I'm like, listen, man, you got to fucking stop that. If you're getting in my head. But it's forced me to stay fresh with it.
And then, yeah, the audience will put it together too.
Exactly. So he's doing it for a good cause.
So friendly. So you said I throw a couple jabs, but
friendly jabs, but it comes from a place of love.
Fair.
Basically phrasing it as, you're a pretty sarcastic, snarky dude, but it's all the way you show love, which is what I love about you. That's why we became friends and why we're still friends.
Oh, cool, man. Hey.
You know, I want to mention off the top is this is our first recording after the LA fires began. I don't want to say like started or stopped. It's still ongoing. There's still a lot of people being affected by it, and will continue to be affected by it, because who knows how long recovery will take even.
Yeah.
After like the Palisades fire, as we're talking, the Palisades fire and Pasadena fires were the two big ones.
Yeah, the Eaton fire
Are still ongoing. They haven't stopped, and it's still something to be looking out for both of us. But we are now safe, and so we felt safe to record.
Yeah.
You and I have both been like at home, keeping an eye out. We were fortunate enough to be the lucky few that were in areas where we didn't have to evacuate. It was still scary in terms of how close it was for us.
And we were kind of eagerly waiting on updates, because you know the evacuation zones are gradually creeping a little bit closer to our area.
Yeah, to give some people like a context, we live on the west side of LA, and the west side is the Palisades as well, and so we were far enough, but also uncomfortably close to where the big Palisades fire were going on. So we were always on guard.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have heard plenty about it, and I wanted to mention it off the top because I think it's truly remarkable what's happened out of such a horrible tragedy, which is you've seen a community being built in LA, and a community formed in a way that I haven't seen before in the 7 years I've lived here, which is people who are safe have been volunteering, and so many volunteers have showed up to the fact that a lot of donation centers have been like, we have too many. People are donating everything they have. People are trying to help in any way they can. And that's very heartwarming to see. Also, I'm sure, Chris, you share this with me. Just this, like, we already had an appreciation for firefighters, but just like a profoundly new appreciation for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the way they're risking their lives, for the work they're putting out, tirelessly 24 hours still to this moment that we're recording. So if you guys are in a place to do so, highly encourage you donate to the LA Fire Department or other charities like World Central Kitchen. We'll put some links in the description that you can, because even though like by the time we put this up, maybe the situation is calmer, but it's still everyone needs help. Still, it's going to be a while before things are just back to normal again.
Yeah, absolutely. No pressure at all. But if you can, that would be awesome of you to do.
Yeah. And I think I want to end off by just saying that LA has this notorious reputation from a lot of people that it's a place where only self-centered people live. It's like, you know, there's no sense of community. It's not like, it's just people are always out for themselves. And I think that always rubbed the wrong way for me, because I believe that self-centered and shallow people are everywhere. It's not just located in one city, but it especially is highlighted that that's not true with what we've been going through currently, which I've seen people wanting to help their fellow humans in a way that you don't get to see that often unless it's a tragedy like this. And so I'd also like to say to everyone outside of LA, if you're reading stuff on social media, and if you're even maybe saying stuff in passing, such as this whole situation's been mismanaged, this is what happens when you put Gavin Newsom in the government, it's okay to be critical of your politicians. It's okay to feel like this could have been done differently. Totally. But I will say, living in this city, this is a natural disaster. Don't make this about politics. Don't make this about what you believe is right or wrong. This was a natural disaster. People's homes were ruined. There's so many people that just lost their houses. And it's easy to think, oh, well, they're in the Palisades, there's a bunch of celebrities. And you might just be on the news. You might just see Kim Kardashian showing her house or whatever, right? No, like you and I both know people that are not celebrities that lost their homes.
Yeah.
And so the only thing I suggest for people who aren't in LA is try your best to look at the situation from a place of empathy rather than from a place of politics. You know, that's where because these are humans that are trying their best, especially our firefighters, everyone in World Central Kitchen that are literally feeding people that have been misplaced, you know? It just gives me, in such a tragic time like this, it oddly gave me more hope for humanity than I had before.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how people's instincts kick in very quickly, you know, when things like this happen, and for better or worse. But I think we kind of saw firsthand kind of the kindness that people are capable of, too.
Yeah, totally. So we're going to continue the show, but it would be weird for you and I to not mention that.
Yeah, because we're pretty openly LA people, so if we don't mention any of this stuff going on and how it affected us directly, it would be insincere to the show, essentially.
So, just to reiterate, Chris and I are safe. We're doing well. If we weren't, we wouldn't be sitting here and recording.
Yeah. We skipped last week shooting for that reason, because we didn't know what to expect. We didn't want to go into a shoot wondering if our power was going to go out or how our Wi-Fi was doing, if we were going to get an update on...
Yeah, this is not our job.
Yeah.
Chris and I do this for fun. So we wouldn't be doing this if we weren't safe.
Exactly.
And if there's any of our audience that have been affected by this fire, our thoughts are with you.
Absolutely.
And just please take care of yourself and be safe. Okay, so let me officially introduce the show. Welcome to Movies That Changed Us. I'm Altaf.
And I'm Chris.
And if you're listening to this on Spotify or wherever you listen to our podcast, know that you can also watch us at youtube.com/movies that changed us.
And we also have a Patreon. If anyone likes the show and wants to support us, you can go to patreon.com/movies that changed us, where you can get early access to podcasts, bonus podcasts, and also weekly commentary tracks. And as of now, we are doing commentary tracks on the Jurassic Park series. By the time this episode comes out, we'll probably be at The Lost World, and I think possibly Jurassic Park 3. We'll pop it up visually.
Definitely Lost World. It's just been a weird schedule, but definitely Lost World. But yeah, go check that out. So Chris, important question. Let's start this off. How did Shawshank Redemption change you?
Well, I mean, you and I both know we have kind of a long story around my first viewing of this movie. Mm-hmm. You've seen this movie tremendously more often than I have.
I kind of grew up with it.
Yeah, exactly. I did not grow up with it. I didn't see it until 5 years ago now? 4 years ago?
Yeah, you saw it in 2020.
2020,
so five years ago.
Damn. We used to have a series on our channel, on the Nice Dude Movie Night channel, when it was originally called Nice Dude Productions, and we had a series on it called Classics I Haven't Seen, which was really funny because the direction our channel ended up going was around us watching classic movies for the first time.
Now, if you're part of our movie reaction channel, Classics I Haven't Seen wasn't a series where we reacted to movies. We just watched it and then talked about it. So kind of like a podcast.
Yeah. And then we ended up experimenting where we mixed an edit of reacting to it and talking about it afterwards.
Eventually just transitioned into doing reactions.
Yeah, so the one that we did that I haven't seen, excuse me for that burp, by the way, was Shawshank Redemption. And so my first time viewing it was very complicated. You know, I had a weird feeling around it because I felt like I had eyes on me because I had to talk about it. That was the point of it.
And also literally, I was watching it next to you.
Yeah.
And so you literally had eyes on you of just being is Chris liking this movie?
Yeah, which is, I don't know, I think some people really like that kind of stuff. I get stressed out from that easily, which is, again, funny to say because we made a whole career for a year out of watching movies for the first time on camera. But this time I got to watch it properly to wrap up my point. And it's fucking great. You know, I think I was really surprised by how universally relatable it felt, even if the movie has a very specific experience around it being around, the prison system in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But there's still like an energy that it has that I think anyone can get a hold of, that I think people can look at it as a metaphor for kind of anything, right? The prisons we all have in our lives, as it sounds cheesy to say. But it was just really interesting how people can see it as like a metaphor for addiction, or metaphor for the jobs that they're stuck in, or whatever, at being in some sort of place in your life where you can't get yourself out of it,
Yeah, kind of like what we were talking about with In Bruges a little bit, of just the purgatory.
Yeah,
That you're
exactly.
in. I think Shawshank Redemption has been a part of my life for a while. When I say grew up with it, I watched it for the first time when I was in high school. But this was also a movie that even after the first time I watched it, it was always on TV. Like, this has been like, it's always on reruns on TBS. It's like TNT specifically. It's such a TNT movie.
Yeah, what's funny is I've actually seen some snippet of the intro of it when I was growing up. I think in high school, I distinctly remember that opening scene when
Him in the car?
no, it was later. It was like still in the beginning when the overweight dude gets beat up by the guards.
Yeah.
And so I remember that scene
fresh
specifically.
fish
Yeah, the
scene.
fresh fish.
Yeah, no, I think this movie's been part of my life for so long. I've seen it so many times. I've seen clips of it so many times. This movie's like, the way it changed me was, it has always been the example of a perfect cinematic experience to me. Of like, this is kind of why you watch a movie. At least like, this is why you watch an American movie. You know what I mean? Where like, you go through a journey, you learn about a life, and you feel like by the end of the movie, you've experienced a life. And it's such an epic in that way, where like, we meet Andy in a specific time in his life, right? But then I actually feel like by the end of this movie, I experienced 20 years with these guys.
Yeah.
And that is been amazing for me. And yeah, as I get older, I attach, like, the themes stick out to me a bit more. But when I was a kid, that's how I felt. And then also, it's that ultimate cinematic experience for me because it just has one of the most satisfying final 30 minutes in a movie ever.
Yeah.
Like, it makes you feel good. You know what I mean? It's that feeling that every studio head is trying to reach for in Hollywood, which is like, I want people to walk out the theater and feel they should feel alive, And that's like, Shawshank makes you feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, going off what you said about like in America, it feels like an American movie. It does have that classic structure of like the one guy holding on to his values and not giving up despite all odds being against him. That was a very common trope in American films throughout the 70s and probably 60s too, like even going way back to like Westerns and 12 Angry Men.
I feel like
movies.
70s definitely movies were dipped in acid a bit more. They weren't
for
as
sure.
hopeful as this, but I do get you.
But there were still like those classic, like there was still like Rocky. There was still like,
Yeah.
what was that? Dog Day Afternoon. There's still really fucked up movies but still had that similar theme of like one person changing everyone around them.
I think this movie is just, I can put it on any day, any time. I can turn on the TV and it can be in any scene, and it's just immediately like it hits those pleasure points where I just know now it becomes better now that I know what's going to happen. Because I feel like this movie is just, there's few movies out there that are just going to take you the right direction. You just know that whatever's happening in Shawshank, at the end of this movie, you're going to feel great.
Yeah. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, and that's kind of nice. You know what I mean? And what I like about this movie, and the reason why it works, is that you get to see all aspects of life through this system. I mean, you see the really dark times where it's really tough to watch, the sisters portions and everything.
Yeah.
And then you also get those like Ted Lasso moments where he's building a library and everyone's excited.
All the boys are having a beer on the roof.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, Morgan Freeman's narration and Roger Deakins' like photography in that roof beer scene is like, that should be in the Smithsonian. Like,
I know, dude. There are some shots in here that I forgot how iconic they were, until I put it on again. I was like, oh yeah, I've seen. Obviously,
list off some. Yeah.
The famous crane shot obviously is the biggest one. That's a cover of the movie of him in the rain. That's a huge shot.
Right.
Obviously, also when they discover the hole that he carved in the cell when he escapes, that shot from inside.
The warden and Morgan Freeman looking in.
Exactly, yeah.
I also think of the shot of these two overhead shots. One is when there's this helicopter shot that goes over the prison and you see all the prisoners going in, right?
That shot stood out to me too.
Then it's the overhead shot of when Andy plays the music for the first time. And then you see it, every last man in Shawshank felt free. Yeah. And then you see that big shot of all the prisoners like completely still. Those two is what I always remember.
Yeah. I mean, how do you want to get this conversation started though? You know, in terms of like thematically. Is there somewhere you want to start? Because I trust you with it more just because you've seen it a lot more often. I have a lot of feelings about it for sure, but you're just naturally more prepared because you saw this movie a lot growing up.
I'd like to start with the idea of hope in this movie and exploring all aspects of it. Not just like it's good to have hope and hope will set you free, which is on the poster.
Yeah.
Hope will set you free is on the hope poster.
It's good to have hope.
That'd be a really funny tagline.
Such a lame tagline for a movie.
Yeah.
Anything. You could put it's good to have revenge. John Wick with his guns.
Top Gun Maverick, it's good to fly.
Northman.
It's good. Northman, it's good to have revenge is really good. No.
I might make that on Canva and put it up.
Let's start here because if we're talking about hope, I want to discuss like how this movie explores hopelessness. Sure. Like what that means. And a prime example in the beginning is that fresh fish scene. There is immediately this like raucous hazing vibe from all these other prisoners. Like they're putting in bets and you don't know what the bet means if you're watching this movie for the first time. And then suddenly when Haywood starts talking to the fat guy, you realize that they're trying to get a rise out of him to make him cry. And then suddenly they reel the fresh fish in. Now, surface level, this scene to me, when I first watched it, was always about like, they're just hazing the new guy. And that's still the case. But I think the way I look at this movie now and the way I look at that scene now is that that's a great example of all these guys basically being like, listen, man, you're really going to fucking cry. That's not going to get you out of the situation. Crying doesn't make it better. In fact, nothing makes it better. So they're laughing at the fact that like these people are like crying and making a whole show out of it. Or like, yeah, do that. We've all been there. You're still stuck.
Yeah, they're conditioning him essentially.
Yeah, there's this
get used to it.
Exactly. There's this general hopelessness. Like, don't have those human feelings. Like there's no point in having them here.
Yeah, I mean, even before that too, like how you don't know for sure whether or not Andy did kill, his wife and the guy that she was with. Mm-hmm. They leave that kind of ambiguous on purpose in the opening, but they show him in court, him denying everything, and they just have him cornered because there's no possible evidence because they couldn't find the gun that he got rid of. You know what I mean? They even cue up the hopelessness of it, like before he even gets to prison, that, all odds are stacked against him.
And you as the audience, if you're watching this movie for the first time, which is hard to put yourself, at least for me, it's hard to put myself in that mindset because I feel like Shawshank's always existed for me. Mm-hmm. But you don't find out that Andy's innocent until like the
last like 40 minutes or something of the movie.
Yeah. Which is so like you end up liking Andy and being behind him before you realize he's innocent.
Yeah.
Which is important. Anyways, but yeah, you're right. It's like from the beginning that's set up. And the way Andy delivers those lines too in the courtroom, he's not fighting for his life. He's telling the truth. He's like, I didn't do it or whatever. But his tone is just like, he's just drab. There's no level of like, he's just lost it.
I know. And what's interesting too is the judge points that out to him where it's like, I see a man of no remorse or whatever he says to him, how he basically says like, you seem really cold, basically.
It registers as like, registers as cold, like uncaring.
Yeah. And it's like really what he's doing, like you said, he's just adapting to the situation at hand and not giving them what they want in a way, almost like institutions. You can look at it from that angle that he's not like you're doing this whole like, no, please don't take me in. I'm not supposed to do that. He knows like I can't. What's that going to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's what Red said. It's just like Andy didn't make a sound that first night.
Yeah, and he's kind of like that the whole movie. He has this weird personality that makes it hard to get a read on him at first until you actually see what he does and how he challenges things.
Andy is mysterious up until the end. Like even when you think you figured him out, then it reveals that he's also been planning an escape the entire movie.
Yeah.
So like you never know anything about him. That's why I kind of argue that Red is the main character. He's actually our real protagonist of this movie, because he's the one that, in my opinion, genuinely goes through an arc that is meaningful and so moving.
He's like Nick Carraway and Andy's like Jay Gatsby or something like that. kind of thing. Like,
kind of. But Red is actually, like he says, the only guilty man in Shawshank.
Yeah.
Like, Red actually committed a murder. And he is owning that.
Yeah, you never know the context around the murder or what,
But what I love about it is, like, by the end, Red realizes that's not even important. I wrote down my notes that I think the reason Red gets approved at the end, not only because it's new people on the desk or whatever, but also because Red finally realizes it's not about him saying he's rehabilitated. It's not about that. It's about him genuinely feeling regret and wishing he could go back. And this movie deals with time in such an interesting way, which we can talk about, but it's him realizing he lost all this time. He can never get that back. But if he could, he'd just love to go back to his younger self and be like, dude, chill the fuck out. And that's what, and Red's real arc is about letting that go and having hope for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that this movie confronts, as well as, like, people's willingness to look themselves in the eye almost over what they did or what, the impact they've made on people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard, it's a hard thing for any one of us can do, right? Because we all probably have some level of pain in our past. And to imagine yourself, like, looking at yourself now in that situation, like, if I could speak to myself when I was going through that, what would I tell myself now? And that's something that I think would make anyone emotional.
It's, I think Red says a version of this throughout the entire movie, which is like, you have, like, in prison, time is all you have. So it forces you to think.
Yeah. And you're alone in your thoughts for a while.
So Red basically had 40 years to think about this, right? Until he finally was just like, man, I don't give a fuck about telling you that I'm rehabilitated.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care about that.
You guys took everything from me. I'm not going to kiss your ass anymore, basically.
The only person I want to talk to is my younger self. It's like, it's true, he's not looking for anything external anymore. He's really looking at himself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what sets him free.
Yeah, it carries a lot of values that, and I've brought this up probably multiple times in this show, but the stuff that I have always said that 90s movies carry when it comes to even like Office Space or even Clerks. These seem like completely different movies, but they do have the same type of feeling around taking control of your life and looking within and not relying on the institutions that we've created to find happiness and to find purpose. And so that's what's so interesting about this movie, because it uses prison in a historical time, but there is something that, like,
it's still a movie that was made in the 90s, so it still has that context that a lot of 90s movies are dealing with.
100%. Yeah, it still, gives off the feeling of, like, the way the people who are in power over you pretend to be your friend. You know what I mean? And then when you step a little bit out of line in a way that they're comfortable with, they will beat you into submission. You're going to stay within your confines, even if they pretend otherwise.
Yeah. It's people aren't what they seem, right? That's another theme in this movie. A small way they do that really well is Brooks, and how you're first introduced to him when Andy pulls out that little worm from his food. Yeah. And Brooks is like, are you going to eat that? And when you're watching the movie for the first time, you're watching it through Andy's perspective, you're like, oh, weird old man. He's just going to eat that worm because he's a prisoner and he's an old man.
He's a crazy guy.
And then he just feeds the bird. Yeah. And you're immediately set up as like, nobody's what they seem.
Yeah, because it turned out to be a lot more wholesome than you expected it to be. And Brooks in general is like just a fascinating character in general, just because I forgot about that rewatching it just, recently.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that whole moment.
I mean, that's what incites the get busy living or get busy dying. Yeah. It's like, that's kind of what and it's also, it also invites one of the most powerful monologues in the movie, which is about what it means to be institutionalized.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know what that word was. I didn't know what that idea was until this movie, when I watched it in high school. Because, when you're younger, you have this like straight up like vision of what prison is, which is someone did something bad. And even if they were wrongfully imprisoned, when they get out, it's a better life. That's what I always thought. Like, when you get out of war, it's a better life. When you get out of prison, it's a better life. I never, until this movie, I think, I realized that, like, sometimes the system can change your entire psyche to rely on it. And it's similar to what people who like fight in wars go through, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Where they,
Yeah.
like Marines, you'll hear about Marines coming back and just not being able to adapt to normal life, where my civilian mind thinks about the fact that, oh, but you get to sleep in a nice, comfortable mattress with air conditioning now. Isn't that much better? And it's like, no, my mind has been trained to adapt to this.
Yeah.
How can I now just change? And like, this movie introduced that idea to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's what trauma does to a lot of people, you know? And I mean, maybe it's not always trauma per se, obviously, you know, but it reminds me of like the, you know, the allegory of the cave, you know, where when you're so used to a certain set of walls around you, it just becomes your whole world, you know? And I think, again, I've been saying this multiple times, but I think that's one of the things that makes this movie so universally applicable, because we all have our institutions, whether it's like our relationships, our jobs, our family, we have our things. And like, the minute you're free of those things, a lot of people are like, wait, what the fuck am I supposed to do? I thought my life was supposed to go this way. That was like, even like when we did our Truman Show podcast, that was the big thing they talked about, whether or not Truman would even want to leave that world that he's in.
Yeah. I mean, it's all in that quote, right? Where Morgan Freeman's like, they send you here for life, and that's exactly what they take. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't just mean you die in prison. That means like even afterwards, your life is never going to be the same. They took that soul from you. Mm-hmm. And I think Andy Dufresne, the idea of hope and all that's in, to me, Andy's not a character. He's like an embodiment of an idea.
Yeah.
And that's why I consider Red the real protagonist of this movie, because Andy comes in and he's this idea of what it means to hold on to what makes you, you. Like when he has that whole speech about the music is like, no, that's the easiest time I ever did, when he was sent to the hole.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, they Mozart to keep me company. I had it in here, pointing to his heart. It's like, that's what they can't take away from you. When Red's like, what do you mean? And he's just like, well, it reminds you of that there's a life outside of these walls, you know, to hope. And
Yeah.
Red's like, you better stop talking about that. That's a dangerous idea. And then he kind of reminds him of Brooks, and Red walks away. It's like this.
That was probably the most moving scene for me watching it.
It's so real, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think let's dive deeper into that moment, because I think it's kind of a horrible coincidence that we're doing this movie so close to the fires. And I don't know if you felt this way. Like we mentioned up top, we were both very lucky, right? That we didn't have to evacuate. At the same time, I remember last week having this feeling of never letting my guard down, always checking the Watch Duty app and always feeling like there's this dread. And I had this specific thing happen to me a lot last week, which was the only other time I had this feeling was during COVID, like early 2020 COVID.
Yeah.
Which is every time I had this feeling of like things are getting better, and I would let myself feel hopeful, and I'm like, okay, the winds are going down, I would have something that would remind me that like, no, we're not out of the woods yet. It's actually much worse. To the point where I remember specifically this past, like last Friday, I was like at work, and I just was like, I remember thinking to myself, I was going through this bout of depression because of everything that was going on. And I was just like, you know what? I think I'm just going to start like not trying to like be hopeful at all about any of this. Let's just admit that this all sucks. And so I'm never going to be disappointed. I thought to myself that. And I think like rewatching this movie last night, that scene really didn't move me. Because I understand Red so completely.
It's incredibly easy to feel that. I mean, the whole movie's built around that, you know, when you submit to that hopelessness.
Because when you submit to that hopelessness, that's a way to survive as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a defense mechanism.
Is that your survival technique as well?
You know, it depends. It fluctuates a lot for me. I think overall, I tend to lean a little bit more on a hopeful, positive side over things. I usually generally have more faith in humanity overall, that like shitty things happen, horrible things happen, but shitty things have always happened throughout all of history. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like every century has these horrible stains, you know, in its timeline that I think we come out okay on to some extent.
Well, it's that thing of just like read history and realize that we're not the first generation to go through life-altering events.
Yeah. And I think my biggest thing, I'm trying to be more self-aware that I am also young and stupid in a lot of ways. And I'm trying to just open my ears and listen more to people's experiences and to what we've experienced in the past, and like, just I try to absorb information where I can.
What are some things you do to remind yourself that there is a world outside? I'm not saying that you're stuck in prison, and I don't want to even make that comparison.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that, how so for me personally, like if I remember last week specifically, when it felt like I had to just be on high alert all the time, because I had to I literally had a go bag ready. You did too.
Yeah.
To just be like, if anything happens, I just gotta go. And for me, a way I kept myself going and I reminded myself there was a world outside, or not a world outside, but that life will go on, is honestly, it's gonna sound dumb, but editing our episode of In Bruges. And it was the most least important thing ever, right? To edit an episode of our podcast.
No offense to listeners, but in terms of our actual lives.
But in terms of our lives and people's houses burning, that was the most least consequential thing I could have been doing, right? But for me, it reminded me of like, oh, I'm editing a conversation about a movie that I really love with my friend.
Yeah.
So my attempt to get through rough times is to do things that make me feel a little bit more normal.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I think.
What's your process?
I don't know if I've really found mine yet. I often instinctively kind of hermit a little bit when I'm really stressed. And we talked about that in other shows before.
Does that help you?
Sometimes being left alone for a bit does help me. I do value in general, I've been trying to just put my phone on do not disturb when I just want to focus on like just being inside my head a little bit instead of constantly responding to people and reacting to things, when I can just kind of be. But when it comes to this particular situation, I do totally feel it. Even that conversation in the movie when they talk about what music does and how important art is to people and, finding their identity through it. It was very moving to me too, because I realized like how much that plays a role in my life. Even in like video games or, I love music and certain things. If they took that away from me, I'd go fucking crazy. Anyone would rely on how did they phrase it again? That there's more than just rocks here or stone.
Yeah. And I love what he says of just like, oh, did they let you bring that record player in there with you? It's like, no, I had it here.
Yeah.
Which is like, they can't take that feeling you get from art.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's why the moment that's so moving is when he plays that music.
When he's just kicking back with his hands behind his head.
And how Red's like, to this day, I don't know what those Italian women were saying, but it must have been so beautiful that it can't be expressed in words. Mm-hmm. And then he says, every last man in Shawshank felt free. And I love the constant like usage of feeling free. Mm-hmm. Like what makes you feel free? It's that moment when he's drinking beer on the roof. It's not the fact that they get to drink beer. It's the fact that they just feel like they did a hard day's work and now they're kicking back and it feels like they're men.
Yeah, like they're just being human beings, unwinding after working.
Son of a bitch started to sound magnanimous. I mean, god damn. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. Even for a moment, though, you think like, oh, maybe this guard, he'll come around.
You really feel that. And that's like the feeling that Andy's trying to give them. Mm-hmm. And also, I love what Red says about Andy is because Andy's he quit drinking, so he doesn't drink the beer. He's like, I think Andy did it to feel free. Mm-hmm. And I like that. It's just that, like, the way Andy feels free is by helping others.
Yeah. That's his whole thing throughout the whole movie is like he's very fixated on the impact he has on other people.
It makes you kind of like take something from the movie when you want to take a lesson, which is like a way you can feel better about yourself and find peace and feel free is by caring about the people around you.
One thing I was reading about when I was reading into Buddhism a little bit is how much... I know, I'm all mystical now. But one thing I read about was how freedom as a concept can be a great thing, but also like a very easy path to suffering in a lot of ways too, because when you don't have institutions or certain things that dictate your life, you're forced to make decisions all the time, and it makes people overthink what path would be like the best one for them, quote unquote, essentially.
Yeah.
And how much that leads to people stressing out because they over rely on things on the outside world that would make them happy, because we think like, oh, well, if I move here, I might do this, but I move here. And you've lived too much in your head. I kind of took the scene with Brooks as kind of another version of that in a weird way. you know, of like when you're so used to one thing and you go out and then you just realize like, oh, fuck, I have nothing now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, the whole sequence with Brooks is fascinating because I feel like the movie's really focused from the moment there's that helicopter shot that goes over Shawshank and into the yard. You're very much like disconnected from the outside world. And when Brooks leaves, you're now fully with Brooks. So it's kind of jarring as well.
Yeah, when you see him crossing the street and almost getting hit by cars.
James Whitmore is so short and tiny. So when you see him trying to cross the street with those fast cars, it's horrible. It's like heartbreaking.
And people are yelling at him like, watch it, old man, you're going to get yourself killed.
I mean,
they said.
It's that line where he says the world got
a lot busier, whatever he said.
Got itself in a damn hurry.
That's what it is, yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Oh, and him saying how like that he saw the first automobile when he was like a kid. Now everyone has them.
Yeah, I know.
Kind of thing. And
I know.
Realizing how much the world just goes on without you, whether you want it to or not. That you just now have to just adapt. They just dump you like nothing into society.
Yeah, it's again, it really, when I was a kid, I know it's more complex than this movie shows it. I understand that, but also this movie was my introduction to like, you know, seeing a prison system portrayed this way. You know?
Yeah.
Like, it's probably worse still. It's probably worse now, which is like, these systems are corrupt. The prison system in America, especially, is extremely flawed.
Yeah.
I mean, there are still people in prison that are in there for marijuana, for God's sake. So it's like, and outside of that, the way they're treated, this fake idea of rehabilitation that doesn't really exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talked about this in Clockwork Orange as well. That movie explores it to a whole nother level. But this movie was like kind of the soft core version of what Clockwork Orange does, which is basically like kind of show you some ideas of like what this prison system is made for. It's made for the benefit of the people in power and to use these people that are incarcerated for their own good, not to actually care about whether they will change or not.
Yeah, they set it up that odds are stacked against them for something as simple as getting some money for a library so people can read, which would only be beneficial to have there. You know what I'm saying?
That's what makes it interesting when Andy becomes kind of like he does some criminal acts, like white collar criminal acts with adjusting the paperwork, and how he says that line. He was like, it's funny, when I was in the real world or when I was outside, I was clean and straight as an arrow. It took me going into prison to become a crook.
Yeah.
And then Red lets out that great loud cackle that I always love. He's like, ha!
Yeah. He's like, that got him.
Going back to Brooks a little bit, to your point, is so when that kind of system is done with you, they just dump you.
Yeah.
They're not prepping you for real life. They throw you in a half house. And this is an old man, like Red said, with arthritis in both of his hands. He's just not prepped for that world. And they just throw him out there with no level of care. And it's almost just as worse as keeping him in prison for that long.
Well, that's the thing, is that the fact that he's still participating, he's still kind of part of the system by being in that halfway house that they give him, taking on the job that they give him. He has nothing left to do on his own. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he's still in prison in a way.
I also love that you don't know why Brooks was in there for that long, right?
Yeah, no.
I like how they keep a lot of their reasons vague. Mm-hmm. Except for Tommy and Andy and Red. You kind of, beside everyone else, you really don't know, especially Brooks. And I'm like, Brooks must have done something really horrible to be in there for that long. But I love the fact that you don't know, because it makes the audience look at this person as a human rather than an incarcerated person.
It protects you from reserving, or it makes you reserve judgment on them, because if you know each individual sentence or what they were for, you'd have opinions about them, and it'd make you on guard for whenever they open their mouths the entire movie.
That's why Red is such a powerful character, because that guy actually murdered someone.
Mm-hmm. And you still loved him at the end.
Because you believe that people can have regret. Mm-hmm. Humans can evolve. You know, it's like holding on to that hope for humanity as well. Not just for yourself, but for humanity.
And not relying on the system to fix your problems, essentially, to rehabilitate you, like you said, that it's all kind of garbage, but you have to do the work on your own.
Yeah.
Oh, can I give a shout out? I forget the name of the actor. Maybe you have it on hand. The guy who played Richie Aprile on season 2 of Sopranos.
I wrote it down.
Yeah, I know.
David Proval.
David Proval.
I think that's how you pronounce his name. Right when I saw him, I was like, oh, it's Richie Aprile. You and I recently watched Sopranos. I'm like watching it. I'm still in the process of finishing it. I'm on season 4 now.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And Richie Aprile is one of our favorite TV characters. And seeing him in this movie now after seeing Sopranos is kind of exciting.
And also, one of the actors from RoboCop is in it too. Did you recognize him?
Which one?
He was the one that Clancy Brown was talking to on the roof when he's complaining about the money he's getting from his dead brother. Remember the other guy who was like, "Oh, really? Oh, yeah, it's not that bad." That dude is one of the bad guys in RoboCop who ended up getting melted by the acid or whatever.
Oh, that was him. Wow, good eye.
I was excited to see that too.
All those guys, just because I've seen this movie so often, those guys are like my friends now. Like when I see Haywood, I just feel like I know him. You know what I mean?
Like, hey. Well, it's always interesting in general. Like I think the prison movie genre is kind of pretty much dead now. I haven't seen like a good prison movie in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not...
We had it on television. We had Prison Break and Orange is the New Black, which,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Oz was I never watched Oz, but Oz was a huge prison show.
Okay.
I think there's a lot more like...
Holes, that's a good prison movie.
Yeah, Holes is a great prison...
I love Holes.
Paddington 2 is a prison movie.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Toy Story 3?
Yeah. It's kind of shocking how Paddington 2 is a prison movie. Chris hasn't seen the Paddington
I haven't seen
movies.
either Paddington
He's not
movie.
cultured like we are, guys.
I've seen Wonka. I really liked Wonka.
If you liked Wonka, the Paddington movies will seem like Lawrence of Arabia to you. Because it's the same director, but on fucking, like, that's his, like, Paddington 2, I think, is his masterpiece. Like, Paddington 2, I haven't met anyone that doesn't like the movie.
Do me a favor, don't elaborate on how it's like Lawrence of Arabia to me, because I just want to experience what you're talking about,
Yeah, it's just really good, is what I mean.
Yeah, no, I know. That's why I was saying don't explain it, because I just want...
Yeah, I know. Do you know the cast of Paddington 2?
Is it Hugh Grant? Is he in it?
He's the villain.
He's the villain, okay. Which is cool.
It's the first... you know how we have this new era of Hugh Grant where he plays like snarky old guy that's a little fucked up? Mm-hmm. Paddington 2 kind of started that.
Okay.
So now, Paddington 2, we have to thank for this new era of Hugh Grant. We wouldn't have Heretic if we didn't have Paddington 2.
Heretic, but yeah.
Is it Heretic?
I thought that's the general Heretic.
I've been saying Heretic, which is wrong. I think in the movie they say Heretic too. So
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, now you're making me question it.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's Heretic.
There's this great line in Heretic where Hugh Grant's like, I guess we're in some sort of heretic.
Does he actually say that?
No.
I was going to say, how was that a great line?
This is wonderful. It's going to be in the AFI list, man.
By the way, listeners, sometimes Altaf does this where he'll cue up a joke to me, and because I take things at such face value, I'll second guess if it was a joke or not, and I don't laugh immediately because I'm very afraid of you saying something sincere and me laughing at you.
It happened earlier today through text when I texted you the link to the Until Dawn movie trailer. Mm-hmm. And I texted you, it's giving me major Get Out and Lighthouse vibes. And Chris completely ignored that text and just started talking about the trailer. And I was like, I hate how you just ignored that. You're like, wait, was that an actual pitch or were you joking? And I was making a kind of a joke that how everyone, whenever a horror movie comes out, everyone's like, it's a lot of Get Out and Lighthouse vibes. And it's just, you took that face value because you didn't want to offend me.
I know. Internally, I was like, that's kind of a dumb comparison. I didn't get that vibe at all. But all right, right on.
So internally, you were like, you're stupid, but okay.
I'm like, but if it was real and I was like, ha ha ha, stupid.
Yeah, no.
I feel like that'd be super hurtful.
Completely fair. Okay, I do want to discuss the idea of how this movie tackles time, just because it's always shocking. Every time I watch this movie, it's fucking shocking to me. The second parole hearing that Red has, after he gets rejected, when Andy reveals, he's like, I'm just wondering where those 10 years went. And you're just like, fucking 10 years?
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that? Because I think, like, for me, that's the most impressive part about this movie, which is how it's able to make you feel the way the characters feel, which is time is meaningless.
Yeah.
10, 15 years could go by and you wouldn't even know.
The prison will look the exact same thing. The people you're around will be the same. Yeah, like
everyone has the same jokes, the same stories.
Yeah, there's not really new experiences you can get that'll make you more wise or more seasoned.
That's why the whole Tommy storyline is so heartbreaking, because when Tommy comes in, that new music starts too when he comes in, where it feels like, okay, this is the dawn of a new generation, right? And he's coming in and he's brought this new energy. And Andy even takes a liking to him. Andy starts teaching him. And it feels like there's something new here to hold on to.
Yeah, well, that's what Red said in his narration, right? Like, once the library project was over, his new project was him.
It wasn't even the fact that, like, Andy was like, oh, I'm bored, let me teach this kid. It was, you could tell Andy had this, like, hope for this kid.
Yeah.
Where he's like, oh, he's so young. He has his whole life rest ahead of him. He has a kid.
Yeah.
And it just felt like, oh, our life is not just, time is not meaningless. Maybe there is meaning. Maybe this guy, if I guide him the right direction, he can make use of the time he has left. And then when that's taken away, Andy's like, fuck all this, I'm leaving.
yeah, pretty much. That was his breaking point, when he realized that it was hopeless to try to find hope in this area.
Yeah,
that he had to just
get busy
escape.
living or get busy dying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because I think that feeling is pretty universal. Obviously, we're not really in prison. No one, most people have not been to prison, but
and I don't want to compare like the fluidity of time in my civilian life to the prison life.
Exactly. Not to be literal, but I think the reason people connect with it so strongly, though, is because when you succumb to whatever situation you're in for so long, time does not slow down.
So humans have a general habit of adjusting. No matter what situation we are. When lockdown started, it felt initially like, oh my God, what's my life going to be like? Is this, we're just stuck inside? 2 months in, we got used to it.
Yeah, we're all chilling at home, playing video games, ordering food.
We went remote. Some people went remote with their jobs, right? And we just adjusted. And it's shocking with such a world-changing event that we just adjusted, right? And that happens I've adjusted now to just like, okay, every morning I'm going to wake up, check the Watch Duty app and see if a fire's coming my way. I'm just like, it just happens.
Yeah.
Right? And so imagine prison and double that feeling.
Yeah.
Right? It's just this feeling of like, oh, time is meaningless. And every day's the same thing. Especially in prison, where it's just like, it's showing through visuals in this movie. That shot of Andy coming out for the roll call in the beginning of the movie, and the camera shifting from the side profile to the middle of all the prisoners walking. This gray building and this feeling of uniformity. Every day is going to be the same. It's all about routine, right? And in life, we all feel like we can just, it's so easy to get stuck into emotion, right?
Yeah.
You literally have to break out of it.
Yeah, you have to do the self-work, essentially.
You want to talk about one of the most despicable villains?
Oh, I know.
Just truly one of the most evil characters in a movie. The Warden.
Yeah.
Played by Bob Gunton, I think is how you pronounce his last name, or Gunton.
Okay.
But
has he been in anything else? I don't think I've seen him before. Or maybe I have, and he's just not popping up.
Let me look it up really quickly.
Yeah, no, I heard you.
It was for the audience. Oh, you know what he's in? Demolition Man.
Oh,
he was one of the officers in Demolition Man.
Got it. Okay, interesting. Interesting.
Oh, he's in one of your favorite movies that you've quoted to me way too many times. Not quoted, but you've referenced. Lincoln Lawyer. You've talked about Lincoln Lawyer to me a lot.
Lincoln Lawyer? Wait, which one's that? What are you talking about?
Oh, you know what I'm thinking of? I'm thinking about the Shia LaBeouf movie. What's that movie called?
Which Shia LaBeouf movie?
What's that Shia LaBeouf movie where it's like this Western that you were talking about?
Oh, Lawless.
Oh, yeah. How did I confuse those two? Anyways, Bob Gunton, great in this movie.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
How do you feel about this villain?
Yeah, fascinating villain. It took me a second to even figure out that he was the villain,
Especially with your first time watching it.
I mean, you get the vibes from him immediately when he's telling them all, like, there's no blasphemy here, you read the good book. And it's a good metaphor for, again, like we've been saying, is how, like, you can't rely on, like, man-made institutions to, like, rehabilitate yourself.
Yeah.
Even if he quotes the Bible and all these things, he's still a despicable human being, and the Bible doesn't matter when what he's doing is horrible.
It's all in that one line that he says, is put your trust in the Lord, your ass is mine.
Exactly. And then also when the guy asks questions like, when do we eat? Or whatever he says.
And Clancy Brown goes over there and just fucking knocks him in the stomach.
And there's a great editing choice to show the shot of him turning away right before he gets beat up. Almost like, that blood's not on my hands. You know what I mean? I'm not doing that.
Which is what he does with Tommy. He like goes into the darkness as Clancy Brown shoots him.
Exactly. That's what he does the whole time. He just avoids the real responsibility, but still takes credit for, the good things that happen in the prison.
And even when Clancy Brown, whenever he does a heinous act, like killing the fresh fish, the fat guy or whatever, he always takes his hat off.
Yeah.
Even when he like beats up one of the sisters.
That's interesting. I never noticed that.
He takes his hat off. And it's kind of this feeling of like, it's just you and me.
This is you and me.
This is not the system. This is you and me.
He reminds me of
There's something so despicable about them.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of Atlanta. Remember how they're in the studio and he's like, "Now I'm not saying I'm going to throw hands, but I'm not the only one with hands."
Yeah. Or yeah, it's like, oh, the Pro Tools, it just crashed. It's like, oh, that's cool, man. It just crashed. Just don't let it crash again. Don't let it crash again. Anyways, let's just go.
Anyone that hasn't seen Atlanta, season 2 specifically for that.
Oh my god, season 2 of Atlanta is some of the best television ever.
Yeah, anyone that hasn't seen Atlanta, do yourself a favor and watch it. This is completely unrelated to, like, thematically. This has nothing to do with Shawshank, but please, for the love of God, watch Atlanta.
Just watch Atlanta.
Yeah,
like, what are
just
you
watch
doing?
It. You
just
have
watch
to,
the show.
We won't let you watch any more episodes until you've seen BoJack Horseman and Atlanta.
Anyways, the Warden.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, also, I love just the very simple metaphor of him hiding his, like, secret safe behind that little yarn, picture that his wife made
Of the
in church group.
Of the passage, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a great metaphor, like a visual metaphor of, like, the Warden hiding behind the Bible and religion to do all that the dirty work, right? Which is, unfortunately, a lot of people do use religion and hide behind as a religion to justify their actions. And this is like a visual metaphor of, like, literally doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very satisfying seeing him get his comeuppance.
Oh, I mean, yeah. It's also like just that speech that he gives Andy Dufresne while Andy's in the hole.
Oh, I know.
Or he's like, we're just going to have ourselves a little book barbecue and dance around it. You catching my drift? Or am I being too obtuse?
Yeah.
It's some of the most evil shit he's ever said.
Well, and, like, because you wonder, at least for me, when I first saw
What does he say? Sorry? You're going to feel like you got railed by a train.
Yeah, something like that.
Take you out of that one bunk Hilton and put you down with the sodomites. It's like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
way he delivers it, it's so bone chilling.
Yeah, okay, no, it's just evil.
Yeah.
And
I also watch it on YouTube so many times. It's fucked up, but it's just like I'm also impressed by the writing of it, but it's also like weird that I watch it a lot.
No,
on
no,
YouTube.
I watch things like that all the time. I get it.
Yeah.
I think, like, at least for me, when I first watched it, I had the feeling originally of, like, oh, maybe Andy's going to get through to him and kind of help him soften up. Like, kind of like, because we've been watching.
Warden?
Like, when I first saw it, I was wondering if that was going to happen because that was kind of what they were queuing up in the beginning when he was trying to set up the library and all this stuff.
And the Warden kind of likes him.
Yeah, they were kind of, protecting him in some ways too. And, and especially because, last month we were watching Christmas movies where shit like that was happening, And so I think, like, by the time you slowly realize that, like, no, he's only pretending to be friends with them because they're only benefiting off of him. Well, the whole time they don't really see him as a human, even if they pretend to. It's
truly revealed when Tommy, like, explains that he knows who actually killed his wife, who killed Andy's wife. And when Andy goes to the Warden immediately is like, I can't believe you actually believe that story. Huh, that's really interesting. Don't waste your time on that. And you realize, oh no, this guy's just using Andy. Yeah. This guy's not, like, has any care for Andy. Yeah, he sent those letters to the people that would maybe fund the library just to keep Andy at bay so he would do the dirty work for him. Yeah. That's all this is.
And he gets sent to solitary confinement for a month.
Yeah, and then another month. He's like, let's put him in another month so he can think on it. God. Yeah. To be honest, like, me personally, I would find it really hard to do time in the hole. Like, it would be difficult for me.
Yeah, that should be just like, okay, so do you think you'd be able to handle it?
So, between us, who's who? Do you think I'm Andy or you're Andy?
Jesus.
Or are you Red? Are you Red? I think you're Red.
Bad podcasting 101.
I'm sure we've done a version of that many times. But, okay, cool. So, you want to talk about the ending?
Yeah.
Because we'll talk about the ending, or, like, the final act, really, the big hurrah, and then we'll get to our audience who submitted how this movie changed them.
Yeah.
It feels like Andy's at an all-time low. He looks menacing when he talks to Red and be like, I want to go to, I want to, when I leave, I'm going to go to Zihuatanejo.
Yeah, in Mexico.
And Red's like, you got to let that go. And then Andy has this, like, menacing look. He's like, I want you to do something for me. I want you to go by the haystacks and find a stone that doesn't belong there. And it's scary when he talked to him. Yeah,
he's breaking a little bit.
Yeah, Tim Robbins also amazing in this movie. We haven't really met. I know Morgan Freeman's fucking insanely good. Tim Robbins, it's funny because you watch him in other roles that he's known for, like Hudsucker Proxy, Bull Durham, or he just does a lot of comedic roles.
Yeah,
This is just like one of his like few like very hardcore dramatic roles.
Do you remember him in Tenacious D?
I was going to mention that too. Like he is kind of known for playing it big and comedic. So it's because he has a very tall, lanky body.
Yeah.
But he's amazing in this movie. Anyways, the next morning, Andy's nowhere to be found. Warden is throwing the rock around the cell. We all know this ending. It is one of the most iconic scenes in any
it's
movie.
such a good reveal when the rock just goes through the poster.
The poster's ripped open. It's that big hole. And then it cuts to the cops going in. And you get that narration from Red, which is in 1966, Andy Dufresne escaped Shawshank Prison. And it's like the rafters are going crazy. Like it's such like fun movie like experience.
Oh, and it's so satisfying because like not only did he escape, but he like planned everything accordingly. So like, all the money that he was laundering and funneling through, he was actually stealing it himself.
It's the equivalent of watching like a super satisfying. It's the equivalent of watching something like Ocean's 11.
Exactly. It's like a big heist movie plot twist ending.
And it's so beautiful. Like I don't know. This is like why you watch movies, right? Which is like, oh God, everything just worked out. Yeah. And then they obviously do that montage. This is just, again, I keep using the word iconic because it's like, this is the scene that you go on YouTube to just watch over and over again. It's the poster of the movie.
Yeah.
And, stop me if I'm missing something or stop me if you want to point out something, but I'm just going to go through this. So we see now from Andy's perspective, everything that what happened is that the little rock hammer that he's chipping away at turned out to be this thing that he realized that he could maybe poke some holes at.
This project he spent nearly 2 decades on.
I think I'm not going to go through how he escaped. We all know this, right? I mean, the fucking length of 5 football fields, it's insane.
Yeah.
The shot of him like taking his clothes off in the rain is like Roger Deakins Hall of Fame. Yeah. like when
crane shot.
When Roger Deakins like passes away, that shot's going to be in the montage. I think what I really want to focus on when we're talking about the scene is Red. And it's when Red gets that postcard and realizes it's from the border of Zihuatanejo, like he crossed the border. And he's like, when I think of Andy Dufresne driving across next to the ocean, I just can't help but laugh.
Yeah.
And it cuts to Red just laughing, and he's just like, my friend did it. It's so moving.
You crazy son of a bitch.
Yeah. How do you feel when you...
Yeah, no, absolutely the same way. I mean, like, I think mostly just that from a universal standpoint, I think we all have like friends that do crazy shit, and you just kind of laugh at that. Like you and I have like a mutual friend that you used to work with and for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Someone that you still... are in touch with once in a while. Sometimes you'll hear of something that he did and you're like, what the fuck?
But there's also this level of joy sometimes when you realize a close friend of yours made it or like did something that you're really proud of. You're like, I can't believe you fucking did it. Out of all the people, you made it out.
Well,
you know what's funny? You know what's funny? Sorry, real quick.
Yeah.
I remember at one point in my life feeling like I was the Andy Dufresne in my old friend group. Like, because they would talk about me like, oh, Altaf like made it out. He went to LA. He made it out of the hometown. Yeah. And I felt like the guy that was like, I'm in Hollywood, baby. I made it in LA. It didn't feel like that when you're actually in it. But like from my friend's perspective, they talked about me like I was the Andy Dufresne that got out and did it.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting.
They said you was hung. They was right.
That's what you remember?
You remember when he saw all of his old friends again?
One of the best fucking jokes. I was watching some of Blazing Saddles the other day recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, such a great movie. Such an enjoyable movie.
I haven't watched A Sense of Reaction. I really want to watch it again.
You got to check it out. It's like, we also missed a lot of lines because we talked over it during the reaction. So,
as many comments pointed out, graciously.
Highly recommend watching it just on your own.
Sure.
So good.
I'll do that. But I was just going to jump in and say real quick that their friendship is just so pure and simple. You know what I mean? They're not going out and like looking to score chicks or get rich together or anything. They're just two people that are stuck in a situation and they just bond. That's kind of the only thing they really have the entire way through. It's just their friendship. And it's honest in that way of just like when you see a friend move on, you kind of are just like, fuck, man, but I miss the old days. And you want to be happy for him. But it's that line Red said is just like, you realize that some birds aren't meant to be in a cage. Yeah. And trapping them was already kind of wrong. I'm butchering the quote. Yeah, he said it was a sin to keep them in the cage or something like that. Yeah. And then he ends it with like, but I guess I just miss my friend. Yeah. It's so heartbreaking and so honest about what it feels like when you're happy for your friend, but you also kind of just miss when you guys used to hang out. I felt that way about you. To be very honest and vulnerable, I remember like the current girlfriend you've been with for a while.
When we first met, you were single. And the first year you and I ever hung out, you were single. And I remember that feeling of just being like, Chris and I, every weekend we hang out and like we're attached to the hip. And I remember when you started dating this girlfriend, and now you've been with her for so long and we're all friends. It's all good. But I remember in the beginning not feeling a level of jealousy, but also feeling this like, oh, wow, I kind of lost him. Like, and that's obviously not true. We talk all the time. We hang out all the time.
We still live together at that point too.
But it did feel this feeling. I was like, oh, it's not going to be the same again.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that person is his priority, and rightly so. But like, it's not going to be that way again. And that's okay. This is better for him because he found someone that he cares about in a world that's so hard to find that. And so difficult. But like, I kind of miss it. I kind of miss my guy being single with me and us hanging out. Like, you know what I mean?
You know what the feeling that we're going to have to brace ourselves for with our other friends in our circle is when people start having kids.
Oh, yeah. That's when it becomes real.
That's when people say, like, your friend will just fucking vanish on you, is when your friends start having kids. We're getting to that age when that's going to start happening, but it hasn't quite hit us yet.
That's like a whole nother thing, right? Like, when you start having kids, it's like, yeah, dude, I got to take care of a human.
Yeah, it's like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go bowling with you.
Can't play pool this weekend. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a literally human.
And my son has karate. I have to take him in.
But yeah, so when Red gives that monologue, you know, that's kind of what I think of.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, man, I've been saying it throughout this whole thing. This is kind of a unifying theme, I guess, is that like, that takes place in like the prison system in the 60s, and we're all still able to connect to it from a universal human emotional standpoint.
This movie's a forever movie. It's always going to be relatable. It's always going to touch you, and it's always going to be enjoyable. There are very few movies like this, but this movie's going to exist forever. Yeah. If that makes sense. Red is let out. I've already talked about his whole speech of being like, letting go of the whole rehabilitation thing and feeling genuine remorse and looking within. And Red kind of goes through the same thing Brooks is going through, right? Yeah. Almost exactly.
Oh, yeah. He gets the same job in the same house, literally the same room.
And is having the same feeling of like, well, the whole thing of like, I can't even take a whiz without asking for permission. Mm-hmm. Right? He gets that postcard. No way. He remembers what Andy told him about
the oak tree.
About the oak tree. And it's that whole speech of like, get busy or get
busy living or get busy dying.
Yeah, it's like, that's a damn right. And it cuts that shot of like Brooks was here and then so was Red. It's so perfect.
As he's leaving though, because he breaks that cycle essentially and starts making decisions for himself.
I'm going to look ahead.
Mm-hmm. And he's old at this point too. That's what's so kind of wholesome and moving. Is that
these are old guys.
These are all old guys. You know, obviously, you know.
We're young, so we can be like, man, I want to start looking ahead for my future. But as you get older, I can imagine that's harder.
Exactly what I'm getting at. That like at that point, you could easily succumb to it. Like, well, I literally have nothing left. All my friends are gone. Everything's, you know, just I have no life. So what else is there?
He lived 3 to 4 decades of his life in prison.
Yeah, he's lived longer in prison than at least it's implied that he's lived longer in prison than he has outside.
So he's like, what? Hopelessness is very real. Like, what's the point now? And it's beautiful that it's to see his friend. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of all it takes sometimes, is that like, oh, I love my friend. Yeah. And it's, again, that's why I say Red is the real protagonist of the movie, is because while he's on that bus, there's that whole speech that he's giving, which is like, I hoped, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that line.
And the movie tricks you into thinking it's ending multiple times. Like that shot of Andy in the convertible going to the ocean, you think it's going to end. And the movie kind of reminds you, it's like, oh no, this is not the story of Andy escaping. This is the story of Red finding hope again. Yeah. That you think the story is Andy escaped prison. Yeah. Because it could end there.
Yeah, but the real beating heart and backbone of the whole movie is the way he inspires other people and the way we can be inspired and still choose to, you know, go with that.
And I just love that the movie's like, no, but we got to see them hug. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it gives a whole different feeling of finality and satisfaction.
It means, I think what I love is that you don't hear what they say to each other. You don't get like a close-up.
You don't need to at all.
You just get a wide shot of them hugging, and you see that there's that beautiful moment where his hat blows off and he doesn't even give a shit. Yeah. Because he just saw his friend again, Zawatneo. He's there.
They have a boat right there. They're just ready to travel.
Oh God, it's such a beautiful final shot. Yeah. It's just like them hugging, and then it just goes to
talk about the color scheme feels different too. Like you see the ocean.
It went from gray to full color.
Yeah, where it's like now they just have their whole lives ahead of them essentially.
Like you said, they're old guys, and the
Yeah.
fact that you can say that is amazing.
It's never too late to change. It's never too late to see hope. It's never too late to look forward to the future, to feel like I still have work to do in this life, you know?
Really well said. Yeah. I remember Rewatchables in their episode. They said that, like, what if there was a Super Bowl commercial that did like Andy and Red playing chess on the boat, like drinking Coronas, like it's a Corona commercial. It's Andy and Red playing chess. Andy finally taught Red how to play chess.
But it's like still hand carved, like their chess pieces.
And they have their hotel, like Ziwatneo Hotel, that Andy thought they would start.
That's fun.
Yeah. So
okay, do you want to get to reading some little old emails?
So we asked you guys how Shawshank Redemption changed you. You guys emailed us at moviesthatchangedus@gmail.com. We're going to read some of those emails out.
This one is from Sophia. She said, "Hi, you two. So, The Shawshank Redemption. This one had been collecting dust on my to-be watch pile for years and years and years.
Go Tubi."
And this is coming from someone who's been working as a freelance author for a film website for almost a decade and who has her own film podcast. Sophie, feel free to link it in the comments if you want.
What's your podcast? Feel free to plug.
But just last year, due to the 30th anniversary of Shawshank, one of my superiors asked me whether I wanted to write an article on it. I told him it would probably be kind of a self-experiment in the vein of, what's it like watching the greatest movie of all time, according to IMDb, for the first time 30 years later? He thought this was a great idea, so I got to write about that very experience. Somehow, after having heard so much about it, after avoiding it for years, after stressing out about my perception of it, The Shawshank Redemption made me forget about all that. It made me laugh, cry, empathize. It was grueling and exhausting and beautiful and so very, very triumphant. And it reminded me that there will always be films to remind me of why I love this art form so much. No matter how stuck in the job I become, how much it becomes a chore to watch stuff, there will always be magic. Long story, but I hope it's at least an interesting one. Smiley face. Have a good one and love from Germany, Sophia.
Yeah, no, that it is a complete experience.
Yeah.
Like, it's a full experience. You get every kind of like emotion you could get from a movie like this.
Yeah. It has the wheel of emotions, as I always like to call it, you know?
Yeah, it's the reason you talk about Lion King a lot and how that's your favorite movie and how that does the same thing for you. I think all of our favorite movies do that, but Shawshank especially, because I think it has that epic feeling of you're experiencing an entire life.
Well, that's what's cool, especially like under the context for Sophia going into it 30 years later, expecting to be bored by it. You know, it's easy to get that way, especially when, you know, you're on the younger side, know a movie's older or something like that. It's easy to be like, okay, well, let's see what the deal is, you know?
Yeah. It's like someone who watches like Godfather for the first time. And they're like, you'll see people that just be like, yeah, no, I haven't seen The Godfather. God, I'm so dreading it. I guess it's so long. I remember having this experience with my friend, and then I showed him Godfather. And he's like, oh, fuck. And I'm like, yeah, man.
Yeah, it's a hell of a movie.
There's a reason why people always talk about it.
So thank you so much, Sophia, for writing that. And we really appreciate anyone that takes time out of their day. It's so hard for me to imagine someone like typing up an email to us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I just know we really, really do appreciate everyone that sends us emails.
And they're always like so well thought out and written and well written. So it's so nice. Next email's from Noah Hallman. I live in Ohio and I got to work in a lot of cities across the state at my old summer job during college. And one week I was working in Ashland, Ohio, which is not far from the Mansfield Reformatory, which is known for two things, the Incarceration Festival and being where Shawshank was filmed. Oh, wow. And the people hosting us one night took me and my coworkers to see the prison, and it was so cool. They had stuff like the tunnel that Andy crawled through. That night when we got back to our host family's house, we all watched Shawshank together, and it was my first time seeing it. Okay.
Wow. That's a hell of a way to experience it for the first time.
Yeah, seeing the location first. Okay, and then he says, it was amazing. There were few other movies I'd ever seen with a better and more deserved ending. Since then, I've seen the movie many times, but still haven't made it back to the prison because I've always wanted to go back since seeing the movie. Maybe I should make it a goal to go one more time before moving out of the state in the next couple of years. But I'll always cherish the memories and photos of me and my friends exploring and being chaotic at the Shawshank prison all these years later. Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know you could just like go there.
Yeah. I want to say I've read that somewhere in like a Wikipedia article or something like that it is kind of a tourist attraction.
Wow.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, shoot. All right. You know, if we ever end up going, we'll vlog it. I'm just kidding. No,
Jesus
we'll pop up
Christ.
pictures of it at least, you know.
yeah, it'll be on our like community post. Like, yeah. All right. Do you want to?
Thank you, Noah, for that. That was really cool. That's an awesome way to experience it the first time.
Yeah. Noah, long time fan.
This one is from Carly. I remember the first time I saw this movie as a teenager. My family rented it from Blockbuster, which is, just to jump in real quick on that, I miss Blockbuster so much.
There was nothing like renting a movie every Friday. Your parents let you pick out one.
Yeah, I know.
I
But
know. I'm sorry to be like snarky about it, but yeah, no, it's lovely.
I miss Blockbuster.
Shawshank is also a great Blockbuster movie.
Exactly
Yeah,
where
yeah,
my
yeah.
mind goes.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so I had no idea what it was about, and more importantly, I had no idea it was based on a Stephen King short story, even though I was becoming a huge King fan at the time. I was fully prepared to be bored out of my mind. Imagine my surprise that it was only one of the best movies ever made. The cast, the writing, even the soundtrack all come together to tell a decades-long story about the most patiently planned prison break ever seen on film. My siblings and I watched the movie multiple times before we returned the VHS to Blockbuster, and I was forever changed. At some point, I got my hands on a copy of the movie poster, and I had it on my wall all through high school and into my early 20s. After I read the short story, I was even more blown away at how loyal the movie had stayed to the source material. Yet another example that Stephen King's best stories are not his horror stories. See The Body, aka Stand By Me, and The Eyes of the Dragon for more proof. Stay nice, dudes. Carly. Which, thank you for the stay nice sign off. It's always heartwarming when people write that.
I know, right? When people adopt that.
Yeah, which we didn't really mention that the whole show, but yeah, this is a Stephen King adaptation.
It's a novella
Yeah.
that he did.
I thought it was, she said short story.
Oh, okay, okay. I think it is a short story where it's Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, which is the name of the actual short story.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so it's interesting when she mentioned I thought it was going to be boring, because that's the thing about this movie is that if you've only seen the poster and the title, it looks like kind of a homework movie.
Well, it also, in the box office, it didn't do well when it first came out,
Because
too.
people were like, what's that title?
Yeah.
That was a lot of it. It's like Shawshank Redemption. What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? And it didn't really, like, Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins were known, but they weren't like huge movie stars, right? So yeah, it is that type of movie where I guess if you like didn't know anything about it, and if you've only seen the title and poster, you're like, oh, that's one of those like classics that I guess I have to see.
Yeah, yeah.
And you never expect it to be as enjoyable as it is.
Yeah.
Such a fun movie to watch.
Yeah, still such a smooth watch.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for writing in.
Thank you so much for everyone for writing in. Thank you so much to our patrons for supporting us again and again. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. And last but not least, stay nice, dudes.